I went into this with a very open question saying, how would you describe this stage of your life? And then just shut up and let the tape recorder run. And people took it wherever they wanted to take it. But I was surprised how many of those had kind of a spiritual approach, not necessarily what I would call religious, but something where they came to terms with themselves and their inward experience.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews.
Hello and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske here. Thank you so very much for supporting this show. Your feedback is absolutely making a difference, because making a difference is what we're all about here on the show. And talking about making a difference, I'm on the line with the wonderful Richard Haiduck. How are you, Richard?
Doing very well, Rick. How about you?
I'm fantastically well, thank you very much. Now, Richard, you and I are going to be talking about retirement. We're going to be talking about your work as an author. But before we do that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself, your pastime, and how it was that you came to write this wonderful book called Shifting Gears.
Well, I've spent most of my working life in the life sciences business. Some of that was actually based in New Zealand. Some of it was actually with clients who were in Australia. So I got to know your part of the world pretty well. I was mentoring CEOs of biotech companies, startup companies, helping them along. Had a great time doing that. So when it came time to retire, I thought, well, that's a skill that I've enjoyed and I think I've gotten pretty good at. And so I've started mentoring social entrepreneurs who are trying to do various poverty eradication or climate change, those kinds of things. So that's taken up a big chunk of my retirement.
Fantastic.
And you asked about the book. It's kind of a two elements to the story here. When I was 7, I wanted to be an author. And I was convinced of it. And people would say, oh, don't you want to be a test pilot? No, I don't want to be a test pilot. I want to be a fireman. No. I said, no, I don't want to be any of those things. I want to be an author. And so I started writing. And I was writing every day. I'd write another story. They'd always be a page or less. They would always be science fiction or some sort of fantasy kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was loving it. And then, you know what happens to 7-year-olds? They change their mind.
Easily distracted.
So I thought, well, basketball would be more fun than this, or doing something like that would be more fun. So it just stopped almost the way it started. Just there was a moment where I was an author and a moment when I wasn't anymore. Then 65 years later,
just around the corner,
I came back to this idea.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't done anything in terms of writing during that time. Mm-hmm. But Rick, what triggered it was kind of interesting. I was retired. I was doing a lot of interesting things, but I saw my peer group doing amazing stuff. And they were saying, here's something I'm going to do with my retirement that's completely different from what I've done in my working career. I'm going to go climb a mountain, or I'm going to be in the Senior Olympics, or I'm going to do something that's a complete reversal for me. And I thought, well, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I'd hear another one. And then a week later, I'd hear another one. And then there was like this eureka moment where I said, there's a book there.
Absolutely.
And I've always wanted to be an author. I think I could do this. So off I went down the path. And I had 2 conditions for myself. It's a retirement project. So one, it had to keep being fun. Mm-hmm. The moment it stopped being fun, I said, I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Yep.
The second one is it had to feel like a real book. It had to feel like it was covering ground that others had not covered. So through this process, it's maintained those 2 criteria. And now we're at the point where the book is being published here this fall.
Yes, I can see that. I'd love to, if we could, Richard, if we could focus on, I guess, the life cycle that we go through from growing up. We talked about being children, and then we grow up and we become adults, and then we focus on professional careers, and then we get to this point in life where things obviously change quite a bit. Do you think from the stories, which I love to delve into also, do you think from the stories that you've heard that we oftentimes try to capture those missing moments that we wish we'd done when we were younger? What are some of the things you're hearing?
Rick, I think that's a great question, but my answer will be it's all over the map.
Right.
I interviewed 75 people. I got 75 different ways they dealt with it. um, some people had a very clear plan of what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And they stopped work one day and they started on this other thing, whatever that was, the next day. The more typical thing was people would go through kind of a transition. They'd relax a little bit, maybe be a bit of a couch potato, maybe just not do much of anything. And then kind of say, yeah, but now I got to get on and do something else. And they would discover what that next activity was. I'd say that's probably the most frequent kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say there was one model that I thought had the most consistent success. And that's what I would call kind of a wind down of working and a wind up of retirement. And not everybody can do this, but for those who can, who have an employer who is understanding in a financial circumstance where they can take a bit of a reduction in their pay.
Yeah.
Each year they do a little bit less work, and each year they do a little bit more retiring. And so there is no transition. It's just all gradually easing into it. And that several of the people that I interviewed followed a path like that, and it really worked for them.
Seeing that we have, Richard, a finite amount of time on this wonderful planet, do you find that anybody's provided feedback about the urgency growing as the time ticks by to do more?
Rick, that's a great question in the context of COVID.
Right.
So the people I interviewed all had these wonderful plans. They were going to do this and they were going to do that. And then along came COVID and they said, oops, I got to stop. I can't do that. I can't go on a cruise ship. I can't be out with my friends and family. I've got to manage my medical risk. But then over time, some of them started to say, wait a minute, that clock is ticking. I've got so many things I've got to do. I've got to find out a way to have an active, fun, joyful retirement, even while not putting myself at risk. So one of the guys who had this very ambitious set of travel plans, and he said, I just can't do that anymore. He's now studying his family's genealogy.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I feel so gratified by that. It's even better than what I was going to do. But he got kind of forced into it by the restrictions and the belief that clock is ticking.
I believe, from what I'm hearing, I think you're working with a lot of positive individuals. Do you ever stumble across those who are fearful about moving into retirement and what they don't know?
Yes. So the book, what I tried to do was get a balance of people. It's self-selected a little bit towards optimists because the people who were really down didn't want to talk to me. One guy in particular had this great retirement plan. He and his wife moved up to a great place, picked their retirement home, and then it burned to the ground in one of these fires and lost it completely. And so he went through a really rough patch. And that rough patch for both he and his wife, just coming to terms with having to start all over again at a time when they felt like they didn't deserve that. They'd worked hard all their lives to have this retirement lifestyle, and then all of a sudden it vanished. I've got a couple of stories of people who went through some sort of a personal situation, one divorce that was a person after 24 years had this surprising divorce, and strangely enough, at about the same time he was losing his vision. So this guy, he was down and he was out. And he discovered kind of a spiritual approach to solving that. He discovered something called Trillium, which I'd never heard of, but it worked for him. And it was a kind of a new faith in himself and his spirituality. I'm rambling on here a little bit.
No, absolutely not.
One of the surprises to me was I went into this with a very open question saying, how would you describe this stage of your life? and then just shut up and let the tape recorder run.
Yeah.
And people took it wherever they wanted to take it. But I was surprised how many of those had kind of a spiritual approach, not necessarily what I would call religious, but something where they came to terms with themselves and their inward experience.
At peace, as it were.
I'm sorry?
At peace, as it were.
At peace, as it were. Yes, yes.
I'd love to. I've been looking through, obviously, all of your bio, your website, and I noticed that you are a keen cyclist. Do you find
Yes.
that, are you still very active? I'd love to learn a little bit about, I guess, your daily routine. Do you still enjoy being active?
So with the fires here in Northern California,
Mm,
the last month was not suitable for biking.
no, of
We've
course.
had extraordinary amount of pollution in the air, and so I've kind of shut down. But prior to that, I average about 3,000 miles a year, and I bike maybe 3 days a week and try to do it on some fairly tough hills and that sort of thing.
Yes.
It was a commitment to myself that I want to be more fit in retirement than I was when I was working.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I thought there's no excuse for not doing that if that's important to you.
I
You
think
can
the
find
body
time.
the body needs to be used, doesn't it, to stay fit?
Yeah, yeah, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that, except the last month, and it's Rick, it's making me crazy.
I can imagine.
I get up in the morning, I say, "Oh, I'd love to go for a bike ride today," and then I look
No.
outside and it's filled with smoke, and I just say, I'd
Yes.
wreck my lungs by doing
It's an awful time, and I'm looking forward to your local area turning the corner and things becoming better very soon. Um, I'd love to talk
it.
about. Go
In
ahead.
part, the title "Shifting Gears" was partly a reflection of the biking thing.
I figured as much. Now, I love to talk about mindset, and I love to talk about goal setting on the show because I think it's useful for everybody who listens to the show. What are you hearing about, creating bucket lists, and what are some of the things that you're hearing? Because I've read your website, and I'm hearing that people in their 80s starting to do things like smoking. Some crazy stuff out there.
Yeah, but there was only one of those. He was 87, and he said, I've always wanted to smoke. I'm going to start now.
Yeah, why not?
Um,
If that doesn't kill you, something else will.
yeah, yeah. There was another lady who is in an independent living center down in Memphis.
Hmm.
She's 102 years old, and she's just a piece of work. She's just lively and energetic. She does a lot of things in the independent living center. But she's just vivacious and energetic, and it sounds like she's really kind of the social hub of the organization, and plays canasta regularly and cooks meals. So people are doing a lot of different things. I would say that one of the things that has been more important than I thought it would be is volunteering.
Hmm.
And some of that's around a sense of purpose. I want to, one guy put it, he says, I've been taking all my life. It's time for me to start giving.
Ah,
And I don't mean writing a check. I mean giving my time and my expertise and my wisdom. And some amazing stories along those lines.
it's funny how we go from being very selfish, isn't it, to a point in time we go, you know what, I've got this all wrong. Are you hearing that?
I wouldn't say all wrong
Mm,
as much as I've got a chance to do something different.
differently.
Life's been good to me.
Yep.
Now I need to do something back. I think that's been part of it. One of the stories is a guy who, at about the same time he was retiring, was diagnosed with cancer,
Hmm.
and he obviously was devastated by that. He had all these plans for his retirement, but he was being treated one day, and he turned to the doctor and he said, "You guys are really being good to me. Is there something I can do to help?" And they said, "We need a cancer house here where people can stay while they're being treated, or where their families can stay. And that would be a community effort." And this guy put 5 years of his life into doing that.
Wow.
and led a whole army of people, both in terms of getting it organized, getting it fundraised, getting it, up and off the ground. And he said, at the end of it, he said, I was more proud of that than anything I did in my 40 years of working.
Yeah, that's incredibly inspiring. You talked about volunteering and starting to give back and pay back a little bit in society. How does this apply to wanting to go back to work? Maybe people, as part of their retirement plan, want to start a new career. What's happening in that space?
There's several different things several different stories I've got there. I'll tell you one that I really enjoy. This guy's decided he was going to be an Uber driver, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of boring. And I said, why are you doing that? And he says, well, it kind of tops up the income for me. We can afford a better vacation now and all that kind of stuff. But he said, there's two things about it. He says, I get to tell the same jokes all day. and he said, and nobody complains about it. Or if they do, their fare is over and they get out.
Yeah.
But then he says, the next guy comes in, I tell him the same joke. He says, I get pretty good at telling it. And then his second thing, he said, and you know what? I get pretty girls coming into my car.
Of course.
And he said, I don't have much interaction with pretty girls, but these pretty girls get in the car, and I, tell them the jokes, and we have a laugh and a giggle. And he said, but the only problem with that is when I tell my wife about it, any fare that I have with a pretty girl, I have to give her the fare.
And that's fair enough too. You talk about, I guess, inward experiences, and you have, I suspect, as an acronym, OWLS. What can you tell us about that? What does that mean?
So OWLS is old, wise, learning still. And it's 5 girlfriends who have known each other all their lives, and they're in their 70s. And they said, we got some stuff to talk about. We're entering a new time. We've got to talk about end of life together. And they meet once a month, and each of them hosts. They take turns hosting it with a topic. But it's all around end of life, not just dying, but also, different things about planning your estate, or different things about dealing differently with your spouse, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And they have become so at peace, was the word you used, and I would say that describes it very well. They've become so at peace with this stage of their life.
Yeah. And
the idea that they're going to die is different than I would have imagined they could have gotten to. Different. I kind of sat and I looked at it and I said, wow, I wish I had the mindset that they've been able to develop. And they really feel good about it. They really feel like together they laugh, they cry, they talk things through. They're great friends, so there's nothing out of bounds in the discussion.
Yes.
And they just get a lot from it.
Can I ask you, Richard, how long did it take from the moment that you decided to put this wonderful work together to the time that it's now available for sale? How long has it taken you to do it, and what was the process like?
So I started in June of last year, interviewing, and that went very quickly and very well, and very gratifying. I was talking to just some amazing people. That part was great fun. I think the things that come after that are not as much fun. So I had 800 pages of content.
A good problem, but a problem nevertheless.
Yeah, I said, I'm a first-time author. I don't think an 800-page book is going to work too well. So getting from 800 pages down to, kind of an acceptable length of 250 or 300 is a giant and painful task, because I had sat face-to-face with these people or over the phone with these people, and they had told me a story that I just thought, wow, that's such a good story. I want to share that. And then I'd look at the edit part of this and I'd say, some of this has got to go. So I had some professional help at that. I had a professional editor who I could turn to and who would give me kind of an arm's length view.
Yeah.
And I needed that. I could not have done it without her.
Absolutely.
Then once the book is in an edited form, the idea of getting published has a set of challenges. I'm doing kind of a version of self-published, but with an organization who's kind of on my team to do that with me. Especially in the U.S., there's a whole bunch of people writing now, and the publishers just are overwhelmed by it. The agents that are involved are overwhelmed by it. And it's very hard to kind of rise out of out of that noise of all of these books, and a lot of them great books.
Yeah.
So I found that process to be painfully slow, and painfully unsuccessful. And about the time this was starting, I went to one writers conference and I met some people, and I thought, oh, this will be great. I'm going to network my way. I'm going to meet all these people, and we'll become friends, and they'll give me a shot. Well, then along came COVID.
Yep.
I might not have been able to do what I planned to do. That networking my way to success might not have worked, but I never got a chance to try. So now I'm calling strangers on the phone or sending an email to a stranger saying, have I got a great book for you?
Yep.
And Rick, it just doesn't work. Now, that may be that the book is no good. I haven't ruled that out. I think it's a great book. The reviewers who have reviewed it so far have told me it's a great book. The people who have read excerpts from it think it's a great book. But, maybe the people who run big publishing houses who are big agents have a different set of criteria.
Yeah, maybe.
But whatever it was, I didn't meet their criteria. And I'm just as happy about that. I've been able to move faster. I've been able to do it my way. I didn't have somebody telling me what the title needed to be or what stories to cut. I had people who were doing it at my direction, doing it the way I wanted the book to look. So that part was great fun. I'm glad the way it's turned out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I love the title, to be quite honest. In all of this, Richard, you've learnt a lot about being an author and writing and the editing process and all these things. But from an interviewer's perspective, what are one of the pearls of wisdom? What's the main thing that you've learnt from this whole experience when talking with others?
Surprise you, Rick. I think for a first-time author, having a social media platform before you start pitching the book puts you in a different league. I kind of did that in parallel. So I would meet with an agent or a publisher and I'd say, I'm going to build this great social network and I'm going to have all of these blogs I do and all these other things that I do. And trust me, it's going to be okay. And they've heard that before.
Yeah.
I've talked to other authors who have said, I built it first. I built the platform. I became a voice in my category. And then I took the book out to get it published. I think that's probably more sensible. It's a little more of a nuisance, though. you kind of want to write the book and then get it out there.
Yes.
And the way I've done it is kind of build the social media platform in parallel with building out the book. And it's matured now, and it's nice. And I got a lot of people following me, and I got a lot of activity. I was interviewed by CNBC the other day.
Fantastic.
And that part has matured at about the time that the book has matured. But I think my advice to others is you probably are not going to be attracting interest for your book without having that platform in place.
Absolutely.
And particularly for nonfiction.
Well, I can say now for sure and certain that you have the My Future Business audience backing you, wishing you all the very best with the work that's coming up and this wonderful book. I'd love to talk about some of the examples that are inside the book, one being about physical challenges. What are some of the things that are associated with that?
One of the most physically inspiring stories was this lady in her 70s. She had 2 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements. She was on a cane for 3 years. but she's a tough, gritty lady. She's always tried to stay fit, but she went through all these surgeries and really had a tough time with it. She came through at the end of it. She says, I got all new parts. I want to do something really tough and really challenging. I'm going to go try to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
A 6-day climb up into the very high altitudes, very tough climb. And I won't give the ending of the story. But
okay.
The grit that she showed and the determination and and saying, I can't wait to do this. I've got to do this now. I got my hips and my knees working. Something else is going to fall apart if I don't get on with it and do it now. And off she went. I really admire what she did. I think the readers of the book are not going to go climb Kilimanjaro, I'm pretty sure. But I think maybe they'll go out for a bike ride, or maybe they'll go out for a walk, or maybe they'll just get off the sofa and go do something.
Absolutely.
If Donna can try to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I can at least take a walk around the block.
Well, I like to say, Richard, if you've got 2 feet and a heartbeat, don't waste it. Do something useful with your life. Get involved. It's not a dress rehearsal. Hey, you mentioned that you had a lot of involvement as a mentor in your I guess your past career and life experiences. Who do you look to? Who inspires you? Who do you follow at the moment?
Well, let me answer that for the book, because there are 3 very big influences on me. There's David Brooks, who's the New York Times columnist, wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And he described kind of the moral change of your second career, that you can shift to doing things that are good for people and that make you a better person. One of my first interviews was with a guy who said to me, you got to read his book. He says, because you're interviewing mountaineers on David Brooks' Second Mountain. Because he doesn't go into all the stories and all the nitty gritty stuff. He talks about the principles and what's important. So David Brooks was a big influence. There's a lady named Terry Gross, who is an interviewer on NPR, who has, unlike most public interviewers, she listens. And her best question is, oh, really? Oh, why is that? And then she listens to what they say. And I thought, that's the kind of interview style I've got to have. I can't dominate this and lead people. I've got to let them go.
Yeah.
So she was a big influence. And then finally, one that you're probably too young to have heard of, but there was a guy in the 70s named Studs Terkel, and he did essentially a book called Working, where he went out and said to people, tell me about your job. And then he shut up and listened. I don't know if they had tape recorders back then, but he got people to talk about their work, what it meant to them, what was the emotional component of it, how they got along with their boss. Not how did they make widgets, but rather how did they emotionally and intellectually relate to their work. When I was writing the book and doing the interviews, I'd do 2 or 3 interviews, and then I'd go read a chapter of Studs Terkel, because he was masterful at this. He was just masterful, and he got some great stories about working. And, somebody said to me, what you're trying to do for retirees is what Studs Terkel did for working people back in the 70s.
You've got two ears, one mouth, 2 opportunities to listen, don't you, really?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I wonder, coming to this point of the call, what formats is your book in? Is it in hardback? Is it audio?
So it's an ebook and a hardback. Both will be published November 17th. We'll do a paperback, but not for a few months after that.
Fantastic.
I've toyed with the idea of an audiobook, and the great audiobook would be to take the tapes of each of the people I interviewed and edit them. But I'm not up to it. I just
that's a lot of work.
Taking 800 pages of written material down to 300 is one thing. Taking however many hours I've got of recordings, but to do it in their voice would have been cool. But in the edit process, you can appreciate this, Rick. In the edit process, people bounce around a lot, and the edit process allows you to make a continuous story. I think to do that in an audiobook in their voice would have been almost impossible.
Yes. Well, I know that you can obviously pre-order the book right now. Is that correct?
Yes, the ebook is for pre-order. The hardcover will be available for pre-order in another about 2 weeks or so.
Fantastic. Now, Richard, more importantly, what are you up to at the moment? What's coming up next for you?
Well, the next few months, I'm going to be doing things to make people aware of the book.
Yeah.
You are my first podcast, by the way.
Oh, fantastic. I'm honored.
I'm going to do more of those. I'll do in-person events to the extent possible. I'll do Zoom events probably more frequently. I think that's going to take up several months of my time. I think after that, I really enjoy mentoring social entrepreneurs, and I spend a fair chunk of time doing that. I've continued to do that while I'm involved with the book, but I'm really fascinated by that process. I just finished working with an organization that provides innovative shelter to refugees. And talk about a group of people that are going to make a difference. I mean, they just have this incredibly hard problem, and these bright, energetic, creative people who are coming up with all sorts of ways to do that.
Yes, fantastic. Now, Richard, I wonder, I'm pretty sure that there are lots of people on today's call who are interested in getting their hands on this wonderful book. Now, where are they going to get it?
So they can go to Amazon now and just search under the book title name. And if you put in just Shifting Gears, you'll get all sorts of gears. You don't want to put in Shifting Gears book or Shifting Gears and then the subtitle 50 Baby Boomers. So it's there. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have other booksellers making it available for pre-order. So if people go to my website, which is richardhaiduck.com, HAIDUCK.com, and that'll have links to all of the sellers who are offering the book.
Fantastic! What a wonderful experience spending today on the call with you has been, Richard. It's just been amazing. Now, with everybody who's on the call that's today, make sure that you get your hands on this wonderful book, and I will be making the links available back to Richard and this book. No matter where you find this call, there will be a link back to at least the website, then in turn back to Richard. But in saying all of this, Richard, once again, thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business Show today.
Rick, this was fun. I appreciated it and enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.